as the legal advisor for the Memphis and Shelby County Music Commission, as well as the Memphis and Shelby County Film and Television Commission. She currently has her own practice with concentrations in personal injury, business, entertainment, and family law. Please welcome Ms. Carly McCullough. Our next panelist is Mr. Mark Yates. He served as an executive banker, public policy expert, and chief executive officer. He currently serves as the president and CEO of Life Enhancement, Inc. Mr. Yates has founded LES Tennessee in 2007 to help children, adolescents, and their families with emotional and behavioral issues. Recently, he served in many public policy roles relating to children and child advocacy. Please welcome Mr. Mark Yates. Our third panelist is Mr. Jennings Bernard. He is the past host of Memphis Real Talk on KQPN AM 730. Please welcome Mr. Bernard. Now on to our rules for the evening. Each candidate will be allowed 1 minute to make an opening statement at the commencement of tonight's forum and 2 minutes to make a closing statement at its conclusion. There will be 16 questions posed during the forum in 4 subject areas: government, wealth gap, P3 economic development, public and private partnerships in black businesses. Each topic has 4 questions dedicated to it. Each candidate will be allowed to answer each question, and you will be allowed 1 minute for that response. Are we ready to get started for the evening? Yes. All right, so also, if you have a rebuttal, if the candidate is posed with an opportunity, a chance for a rebuttal, directly challenged by an opponent, you will be given 30 seconds for that rebuttal. So we'll start with Ms. McCullough for our first question for the evening.
Opening statement.
Oh, yes, our opening statement. We'll start this evening with your interpretation of the state of black businesses in Memphis. Each candidate will be allowed 1 minute.
I didn't just jump up here. We drew lots back there, and I came out number 1. Thank you, first of all, to Hattie Lou and to all the sponsors. There's so many, I will not list them all individually. But as indicated by Mr. Smith's comments and by the moderator's comments, this is indeed not merely some abstract issue, but something that's of critical day-to-day importance, and particularly coming on the heels of the Blueprint for Prosperity conference that I held last week that brought a focus to Memphis, Tennessee on prosperity and, of course, also poverty. This is not an abstract notion for me. I was raised in a small grocery store, which is still in business in Lebanon, Wilson County, Tennessee, and then fast forward to my role as mayor. I know full well, as was once said, that a nation cannot survive half slave and half free. Our city cannot prosper unless we all join equally in that prosperity. This is why in city government we have a sense of intentionality. You will see the precise things that we're doing. It's not going to happen unless we push it. We're up to that. We look forward to answering your other questions. Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you. Good evening. What was mentioned here earlier is a serious problem. When you have a 30% poverty rate, when you have a 0.1% rate of black businesses getting money. Now, I will tell you that a lot of this is perpetuated by, we've had a black mayor in the city. We've had a predominantly black city council. We got a black county commission. And we've even had at one point a black mayor in the county. The sole contracting agent for the city, when we get into government-private partnerships, have been the mayors of those cities. And for the last 20-something years, we have had them in charge in the city of Memphis and also in the county. So if contractual agreements have not been made, who does that fall on? Since they are the sole contracting agents. I will tell you that our government has failed us. Our leadership has failed us. They have not put Memphis first. They have not put
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. McCullough.
First. Thank you.
in the city of Memphis borders.
You need to mic.
Speak to Mike.
Black businesses currently comprise an insignificant percentage of business receipts from government and private sector combined within the city of Memphis borders. Is this a priority issue for you? And if so, what solutions are you prepared to implement should you be elected as mayor?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Precisely, this is 1 minute, right? Let me give you some precise things. One, let's pull together all of our efforts, get them under one roof so that it's so easy for anyone who wishes to gain greater opportunities and access to business with the city. We're going to do that. We already have backed the purchase of the Universal Life Insurance Building along with Seth Tucker. All of these services will be under one roof. Make the certification process universal so that you don't have all of these. Make sure that once you're certified, it applies everywhere. Relax some of these bonding requirements. I sit there all day trying to sign contracts and it's a one-person operation and they want a $500,000 bond. We're relaxing that. The insurance requirements, the service impediments, we're relaxing that. But as indicated, the city only has a small portion. We're going to make sure that the private sector, where the bulk of the dollars are spent, also follow the same practices that we do. That's where the impact will come.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Mr. Williams.
We have to implement a Memphis First policy. And in that Memphis First policy, we have to make sure that a lot of the businesses within the city of Memphis have first dibs. Now, I know that there's a percentage that we can only offer. However, when we're doing pilots, when we're doing business with a lot of the bigger businesses, we have to ensure, and the mayor has the ability to ensure that they issue contracts to minority. When they were building the airport in Atlanta, the mayor said, until we get minority contracts on my desk, we're not going to move forward with the project. We got to stop talking about it, and we have to start implementing it, and we have to start doing it. And we have to hold these companies accountable when they come into the city of Memphis and they're taking our tax dollars and they're building these big projects. We also have to form consortiums, to whereas a lot of the smaller companies that don't have the ability to handle the bigger jobs, we have to bring them together so that they can in fact form a consortium so that they will be able to accomplish those type jobs. And we have to ensure that that happens.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Question 2 will be posed by Mr. Yates.
Question 2. How can the agencies and affiliates currently charged with providing assistance to black businesses in the city of Memphis be better utilized to increase the development and long-term prosperity of these enterprises? Examples of these agencies and affiliates include the Office of Contract Compliance, MORE, MBDOC, BBA, MMBC, TSDtv, etc.
It goes back to my earlier answer about getting them all together so they can communicate, work from a common base of information, what contracts are available. For example, the Office of MORE reports out on a weekly basis what opportunities, contracting opportunities. But if the others do not know about that, then you still have a problem. So pulling them all together, making sure that they're using the same language, the B2G format, which is basically a monthly format that comes out where everybody can see. In other words, if there's an abundance of contractors in one particular area, but there's a scarcity here, then MORE needs to get involved after OCC tells them that. But right now we're scattered everywhere. RBC is one place. We're going to put them all under one roof. We will bring in the Chief Diversity Officer. That job description has been posted, so you'll have one person overseeing all of this, setting the same standards. Those are just a few of the things that we can do, and we can do that right away. Those processes are underway right now.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. Mr. Williams.
We need to stop playing. We need to stop playing. What we need to do is to enact everything that we're saying. We already have a lot of organizations in place, but we're not utilizing those organizations to their fullest capacity. And the other thing is, we all know, anybody, I had a small business, anybody here that had a small business, we know the same people are getting the same contracts and they're not allowing anybody else to break that ceiling. We got to stop that. It's time for us to allow our young people to get involved and break that ceiling. It's time for us to actually embrace our communities, embrace small businesses. We should be creating black millionaires in this city, just like any other progressive, predominantly black city. And we have the ability to do that. We just have not done it. We got to hold people's feet to the fire, and we have to do what we're supposed to do as the mayor, as the government, we, the people. And it's time to give this city back to the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Question 3 will be posed by Mr. Bernard.
All right, the lengthy and sometimes cumbersome contract procedure can be financially challenging to black business with limited cash flow. What would you do to address this issue?
You used the word at the beginning, lithium. What did you say?
I said the lengthy.
Oh,
Lengthy. Okay.
sure. I pointed out earlier, relaxing some of the bonding requirements, all of the insurance requirements, and for those contracts under $50,000, we're making a concerted effort to just pick up the phone and call and say, hey, look, do you have 2 dozen mops? And you don't have to go through all of this, I'm bidding. We're doing that now. As a matter of fact, we're having a conference, I believe on September 10th, so you'll learn about those contracts that fall under that $50,000. You know, if you get enough under $50,000 contracts in a year's time for a small business, and I can tell you because I had a small law firm and of course a small grocery store. So you're absolutely right. We're going to streamline that process. It can be done over the telephone, online. You have to understand that if you're a small operation, you don't have someone you can leave back home at the store while you go downtown. That's why we were one of the few cities in the country that received that $50,000 SBA grant. We announced it just the other day for what they call one-stop shopping. If you want to start a business, you go to one place. So we're streamlining that.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. Mr. Williams, the same question.
We already have the Renaissance Center. We already have the Black Business Association, and those things are put in place to help streamline and to help educate small business owners on how to achieve and how to get money to shore up their businesses. But guess what? The money is not there. You know, over the last 4 years, I think the Economic Development Growth Engine gave $25,000 loans, $25,000 loans to small businesses, which are really no good. And I think it equated to adding 1 job. Small businesses are the staple of a community. And what we're going to have to do is to really, I would take back the pilots from the Economic Development Growth Engine because they're not a business entity and they do not have the ability to have fiduciary responsibility of my tax dollars. But I would also take that money because we were giving them $6 million a year, and guess what? Rededicate that to dealing with small businesses, trying to build small businesses, trying to shore up small businesses in the community. That's the problem. Once again,
Thank you,
we
Mr.
have
Williams.
not invested in our communities and small businesses.
I will be posing question 4. When black businesses are partnered with larger vendors on contracts, they faced challenges with getting paid appropriately for the work they've put in. What strategy would you employ to ensure that black businesses receive adequate compensation for their work?
First, you have to lead by example, and I said earlier, the city has to make sure we're paying on time, and I went on a crash course to make sure we're doing that. 85% of our invoices are honored within about 15 days, which is a drastic improvement. We would then impose those same stipulations on the private sector. And this is something that's underway right now. We're working with the chamber to get them to sign an agreement with us, which will basically say to those private companies that act right when they're doing business with the city, oh, they'll do the right thing. But what do you do when you're not on a city contract? You know, they've often said that conduct is what you do when somebody's watching you. Character is what you do when nobody's watching. We want to change the character of the private sector business so that they will honor the same standards in their private dealings that they honor when they're dealing with us. And that would include timely payment, scheduling of the work, sequencing of the work, those things that stand in the way of a successful small business enterprise.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton.
Lead by example. We have not, as a city, been paying our bills on time. A lot of small businesses get hurt because they don't get their money so that they can remain operational. The city is not known for paying its bills on time. The other thing is we do have to become the police. We do have to represent those small businesses. So we have to police those larger businesses and those larger corporations. But once again, we can't just talk about it. See, we've been talking about what we're going to do for so long, but we have not followed through on what we've been talking about. So we, as the government, who is responsible to the people, we have to enact those things. We already have a lot of stuff in place. We have a lot of good policies in place. We just have to make sure that we adhere to them and we follow them to the letter and we hold everybody accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. We are moving on to topic 2, closing the wealth gap between blacks and whites in Memphis. Again, question 1 will be posed by Ms. McCullough.
In your view, what are the reasons for the wealth gap between whites and blacks in the city of Memphis, and what are the effects of this disparity?
I think everybody in this room knows that because of our sordid racial history, not merely in this city, but in this region as a whole, that's the kind of thing you do not overcome just because you have a one-day conversion. The vestiges of our sordid history are still with us, and we have yet to overcome that. And this is why we have to act affirmatively. This is why I've taken the step, and it's the first of the nation, of having a national conversation on prosperity, stated conversely, how do we reduce poverty? We've set a goal of reducing poverty by 10% over the next 10 years. We've gotten started on that, and there are 4 ways. More jobs, accompanied by the good training or good paying jobs, reduce the cost of housing, reduce the cost of energy, and reduce the cost of transportation, because our research shows that the rate of the cost of living for the poor increases at 3 times the rate of any increase in income they get. You increase their minimum wage, boom, it's eaten up. Living wages, boom, it's eaten up. So we have concrete plans for reducing the cost
Mr.
of
Wharton.
living.
Mr. Williams.
When we talk about the city of Memphis, we already know that there are about 5 to 6, 7 families that have a stronghold on the city of Memphis. And guess what? We still cater to that. When you talk about those individuals that are always receiving the business, those individuals that are always receiving the development projects, it's the same people. Once again, we got to get real, and we got to talk about these things, and we got to bring them out, and we got to deal with them so that we can get other people involved. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. When I talk about pushing the pause button on economic development, a lot of people say, well, he don't want to continue economic development. That's not true. I understand that you have to have economic development for growth, but at the same time, you have to have smart, targeted development so that everybody can be included and not just the same people all the time. We're giving away $25 million for ballparks. We spent $195 million for Bass Pro. That don't belong to the people, but we're going to be paying for it for 30 years. They're talking about doing a $233 million project at the fairground. That's not going to belong to the people, but we're going to be paying for it for 30 years. We got to start doing businesses that are going to be owned by the citizens. Thank you.
Question 2. Let's please hold applause to the end of the forum. Question 2 will be posed by Mr. Yates.
Question 2. A 2014 study by the Pew Research Center, an internationally recognized think tank, showed the median income of white households was 13 times that of black households in Memphis, Tennessee. As a mayoral candidate, 1, how important is closing the racial gap to you? And number 2, and more important, what steps would you implement to ensure its reduction and quantify your efforts?
To answer the question succinctly and directly, it is of critical importance. As I said earlier, There's no such thing as a city where half of the folks are making progress economically and the other half are not. That's common sense there. How do we narrow that gap again? First, a good basic education, which we're making strides on. It's shown that what the failures in pre-K follow us all the way through. Make sure we close the educational gap first. That is the best way. If you close the educational gap, you close the skills gap. Once folks get out of school and into the job market, once you close the skills gap, make sure that they get into the jobs that we have to bring here, the good paying jobs that are hard to come by these days, but we're kind of holding our own on bringing those jobs here. Make sure that they have access to the same financial systems that everybody else does. For far too many of our individuals, their check is cashed at a corner store. The emergency room becomes their patient care provider. So again, close all of those gaps. But again, education, job training, get the good jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. Mr. Williams.
After traveling all over the world, I have friends of all ethnic backgrounds. So I definitely understand diversity. Memphis still has a subdued prejudice here. I mean, black against white, white against black. It's here. Once I came back, it's very evident. But we still have to get past that. We have to bring it to the table, and we have to start sharing. But we got to break down those companies that are always receiving the preponderance of the money, and we have to start educating our young people. We need to start catching them when they're young. We need to go back and reinvest in our young people. There was a philosopher that once said, if you do not invest in your youth, you're a society that is destined to fail. See, that we used to invest in our youth. We've stopped doing that for some reason. And that's what's creating the economic gap. We got to go back and we got to get these people that were left behind, and we have to bring them forward. We need to start, Nashville is doing a very good program, coding. They're teaching young people how to code in elementary school. Then they're shoring up their community centers and teaching them how to code as well. Those are going to bring good, high-paying jobs. They're producing at a rapid rate. We got to get into industries that are going to provide better jobs. We have to invest in our people, and that's what we have not done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Question 3 will be posed by Mr. Bernard.
One of the reasons for the large, you hear me? Excuse me. One of the reasons for the large disparity in wealth between white and black businesses is that black businesses often start without equal capital to compete, with their counterpart. What resource or assistance will you offer to provide to black business startup assure equal funding?
Thank you. One of the things that we are working on as we speak is coming up with a meaningful revolving loan program. You are absolutely right. We can go through all of this, opening the doors, but if you do not have, say, the first 90 days of operating capital to stay afloat until that first draw comes in, you're not going to be able to make it. So just to answer your question concretely, we're in negotiations with the banks now, at least $100 million where folks can come in, and then we can back it up by what they call, under our CDBG program, 108 funds, in which we serve as a guarantor if the business does not pay back. So again, set up the revolving loan fund with the help of the banks, back it up by the Section 108 funds. That's federal money we get from the government. We are allowed to back up credit for the private sector. So that's what we will do. We've done it along the lines of Mr. Wynn. We've done it with the big companies. We need to do it with the small companies, and that's what we're going to do.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. Mr. Williams.
As I said earlier, small businesses are the staple of the community. If you go to New York and Chicago and different places like that, what you're going to find are a lot of family-owned businesses that have been in business for 20, 30, 40 years. If the business prosper, then they actually pass them on to their children. And those are the businesses that are in the community. You don't see that a lot here in the city of Memphis. You don't see that because we have not taken the opportunity to develop those businesses. And that's what we need to do. As I said earlier, With all of the money that we're giving away, we don't have a $57 million obligation to the schools anymore. We closed down inspection stations, which generate $12 million. We increased our taxes from $309 to $340. That's $31 million. That's $100 million I just showed you that we should be to the good. But our problem is we continuously invest in everything except what really counts, what really matters. We got to get back to the basics in this city and focus on the foundations, focus on the core services in this city. Once we develop all of that, then guess what? Businesses will come. We start developing our young people so they'll be prepared to actually accept those jobs and those responsibilities and those roles. And we have to hold them accountable and have high expectations from our young people.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
Please hold applause till the end of the forum. And again, I have question 4. The economic development of the city is an issue that all of you have made a priority. Well, both of our current candidates present. How will you ensure that black businesses are included in Memphis's development through opportunities that promote prosperity and wealth attainment in the public and private sectors?
Again, it's to bird dog it and just to stay on it as we're doing through the Office of Contract Compliance. And even over at EDGE, Ms. McCullough knows this, we have a very rigid set of standards there before they get the pilots, and we hold them to that. In many instances, they have exceeded that. So it's not a matter of merely what do we in the city do with our contracts, but holding those private dealings to the same standards that we have in the city. But again, the key is to make sure that the door is open and that there is, as far as possible, a level playing field, but having access to capital, paying the bills on time, just the basic. There's nothing really, there is no silver bullet on that. It's simply the basics. Being sensitive to scheduling on construction jobs. The smaller companies have a big difficulty because your work has to be done at a certain time, and unless the contractor is willing to work with that smaller business and reschedule around his availability, there's going to be an unlevel playing field. So it's just the basics of a fair contracting process.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. Mr. Williams.
Once again, I say we need to push the pause button. And everybody want to make it appear that I'm against economic development. That's not it. Mayor Luttrell, when he took over the county, you know what he did? He pushed the pause button. He froze capital improvement. He took a look around, he retooled, and guess what? This year they had excess money. They had extra money. They're trying to figure out what to do with the $22 million that they had left over. So I'm saying for the betterment of the city, to stabilize this city, we have to stop. And guess what? We got to come up with new, innovative ideas. We got so many smart young people out there, so many smart millennials. I talk to them all the time that have so many good ideas. But we're not utilizing our young people. That's why they're not coming back to this city. So we have to start incorporating them into the future and the development of this city and stop boxing them out. This city has so much potential. But guess what? It's up to us to determine what we're going to do with it. And if we keep on the course that we're going to go bankrupt. We currently have a $1.6 billion debt service. We pay $160 million a year on our credit card. We're never going to get out of trouble.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
We are moving on now to topic 3, African American participation in community and economic development in the city of Memphis. Ms. McCullough.
What economic development projects or initiatives have you created, endorsed, or supported within the last 4 years that have been established for the development of African American businesses or African American communities?
Well, you've heard a lot of talk about the EDGE organization, which kept this city and county actually in the running at all. Before that, it was so fragmented that we had been red circled out. And within that, and again, there are folks in this room who know that we have a very aggressive equal opportunity plan within EDGE. Every contract, every request is vetted carefully to make sure that MWBEs are included fully in it. If it doesn't get through that test, it doesn't even get to the vote. The other thing we're working on right now are these programs, community builder pilots, which will focus on the core city. You don't have to base it exclusively on jobs, but what are you going to do, say for example, with the Mall of Memphis site? If we bring it back, all of those small businesses around there will come back. The other thing is the CRA program, Community Revitalization Agency, put it under EDGE so that it will have more tools to stimulate community development. I've used the Bloomberg funds. We've gone all over Memphis.
Thank you, Mayor
with
Wharton.
Memfix and Memshop, and that's been a big boom
Thank
for
you,
small
Mr. Wharton.
businesses. Thank
Mr.
you.
Williams.
I think when Mr. Berlin got up here, he said that minority businesses are receiving 0.1%. So that does not lend to prove that the economic development growth engine is doing what it's supposed to do, or that it's being held accountable. Now, I will tell you, the only business that I've been involved in is the Memphis Police Association. I will tell you that when I took it over, it was almost going from paycheck to paycheck. I will tell you that it is a multi-million-dollar organization now under my tutelage. I will tell you that we branded the Memphis Police Association in this city again. We've made it a viable, visible,
Thank you, Mr.
and
Williams.
vocal organization. Thank you. That was a minute? Jesus.
I'm sorry, continue. You had the wrong time signal here. Please continue. My apologies, Mr. Williams.
Always me.
Timekeeper.
Always me. Always me. What's up? Jesus, I can't be on WREG. They don't want to listen to a brother.
Yeah.
That's all right, man, you know.
Hey, look, I might not be on that WREG.
We're going to be together, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, you made me lose my train of thought. When I get to rolling, I'm ready to roll. But I will tell you that I have the ability. You know, after traveling all over the world, when I was in the Army, I managed millions of dollars worth of equipment and hundreds of personnel. I know what it takes to build a top company. I've done that over and over. I've had my own companies, small black businesses, that I gave up when I went down to the Memphis Police Association. But I know Memphis has the ability. Memphis is wide open. We got to start teaching our young people entrepreneurship. You don't necessarily have to always work for somebody. Convicted felons, if we send them to HVAC school, give them a van, put them out there in the community, make them their own CEOs. And guess what? You give a man his pride, his dignity, and his integrity back, and what did we just do? We stopped somebody from reverting back to crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Please hold your applause to the end of the forum. Mr. Yates.
Question 2 in this topic. It appears that the elimination of blight, a major priority in your campaigns, has been a major priority in your campaigns. Many of these blighted structures are located in areas where African Americans reside. Gentrification has recently become a major concern of these residents. How will you promote the redevelopment of black housing and business development in these areas?
First, before you build up, you got to clean up. And I think if you look at the hundreds of lawsuits we have filed, and I might point out, for those who think we might be picking on folks who are down on their luck, these are folks who are just abusing our city. The lawsuits we filed the other day, South Haven, Mississippi, Holly Springs, LA, these where the owners live, and Queensland, Australia. So basically folks have used Memphis as a dumping ground. This is why we've been so aggressive. So clean up, but it's not enough to clean up. After you clean up, we have to make sure that we come back in with the assistance for those who lived there at one time but had to flee for whatever reason, so they can come back. This is why on our Hope 6 models, we do not come back with this is low income housing, it's mixed income. Lauderdale Court's mixed income. University Court is mixed income. We did something that hasn't been done anywhere else. I found out that the state had $6 million up there in HARP funds that was supposed to help folks recover their mortgages, but folks said they didn't want it. They walked away. So we're using that to clean up and build homes in the neighborhoods.
We have to stop allowing people to kill our neighborhoods. That's what they're doing. when you shut down a community center, you shut down a school, you shut down a library, you in effect kill that community. And our government has allowed them the ability to do that. We used to have pride in our community where we lived, whether it was Booker T. Washington, Manassas, North Memphis, South Memphis, wherever. Even though we lived in poverty, we didn't know we lived in poverty because we had pride and we kept it clean. I will tell you, even with the Hope 6 grant money that they were getting, they were utilizing it wrong. They didn't tell the citizens that they were supposed to work in conjunction with the residents in that area to rebuild those communities with their input. Hello. They built them the way they wanted to build them, and they parsed them out the way they wanted to parse them out, because that's when they displaced all of those individuals from Hearst Village, Dixie Home, Foot Home, and moved them out into Hickory Hill. We're not being real here. We're not being truthful with ourselves. I mean, when we get that Hope 6 grant money, we have to utilize it the way it's supposed to be utilized. We've pushed people into poverty.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
Mr. Bernard.
The current administration has above average participation rate for black-owned businesses on at least 2 major city projects, the Bass Pro Pyramid Project and the Fairground, Tiger Lane. Given the fact that the city has exceeded its participation goal on both projects, would you support legislation requiring a 50% participation goal for black businesses on city projects with total development costs exceeding $10 million and on projects located in the African American community?
Now, I could get a lot of applause for saying, yeah. But you could. Look, I'm not going to mislead anybody. That'll be flat out, downright illegal, and it'll be struck down. You'd mislead a lot of people. The fact is, you have to do a disparity study, which we're doing now, and you can't just throw a number out there. But I would support higher limits, and as you said, we exceeded already because we keep our foot. We stayed on them. If you'd be surprised to know that on that Electrolux deal, we didn't have it rigid, but they exceeded everything that we asked them to do. Same thing on Mitsubishi, as you pointed out. We had a 32% participation rate on the Pyramid, the Bass Pro deal. We had right around 50% on the Fairground. So we're there even though it hasn't been mandated. But I would support as high as is legally possible, but I'm not going to mislead you and just throw out and say, yeah, one candidate saying 38%.
Than't you, Mr.
That
Wharton.
won't stand the light of day, but it sounds good, and I'm not going to mislead you. Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
I have to agree with the mayor. You can't do that. It's actually the best company for the job. Now, what you have to do is to continuously work with these African American businesses to build them up so that when they do bid for these jobs, they have the equipment, they have the personnel, they have the ability to be able to fulfill the requirements of those jobs. So now they're competitive, regardless of whether you have a quota or not. What we have to do is to continue to build black businesses so that they will become big businesses so that you don't even really have to look at it. Now, should there be a requirement since the city is 65% African American? Yeah. So that you can put some money back into the community. But when you start talking about 50%, I think you tie your own hands then. You get into a point to whereas you may not be able to fulfill that requirement. And like the mayor also said, I don't think the legislators would actually pass that anyway. So that's an unrealistic goal. But I do think that we have to just continue to work with
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
smaller black businesses. Thank you.
And again, I have question 4. The city's Equal Business Opportunity Program has experienced modest success with the construction and other skilled labor businesses. However, black businesses providing professional services, particularly in the areas of legal, insurance, planning, architectural engineering services, and information technology services, are still largely excluded from major development projects. What measures would you implement to ensure black businesses offering professional services are included in the city's major development projects and receive compensation commensurate to what their counterparts have received?
Again, first you lead by example. Until I became mayor, the city's books had never been audited by a minority firm. We had a firm in town here that was good enough for Birmingham, Atlanta, Jackson, Mississippi, but they weren't doing our books. For the first time in history, Banks, Finland, White is not a subcontractor, but actually auditing our books. I wanted to go first before I went into the private sector to start telling them what to do. Then move into areas like the pension. We now have minority firms where they're managing millions of dollars in our investments, insurance, our deferred comp program. I guess I can go ahead and say this. There will be a black firm in on that for the first time. So we have to be very intentional on where the big money is involved, and that's precisely what we're doing. Legal department has exceeded, what was that? I can't see that. Is that what, am I out of time? 10, okay. Our legal department, professional services, has exceeded every expectation. So that's precisely what we're doing. In some areas where previously minorities and women were excluded, same thing.
Thank you,
in
Mr. Wharton.
investment.
Mr. Williams.
I would definitely try to work to make sure that minority businesses, minority lawyers, minority accountants, all are receiving what they're due. But I also say we have to get back to developing our young people. We have to get back to putting them in a position to whereas they're going to be able to assume these positions and the responsibility. When I look around City Hall, when I look around at a lot of the black law firms, when you look around City Hall, it's predominantly black. So I will say that the city is doing a job. But I will also tell you that once again, we got to make sure that it's the right person for the right job, the right company for the right job. Just because they black don't mean that they're honest, don't mean that they're right, don't mean that they mean you good, and don't mean that they're working on behalf of the citizens. So let's not get hung up on because it's black. Let's make sure that it's right. Let's make sure that they're competent. Let's make sure that they're capable. Let's make sure that they have the citizens and the city's best interests at heart.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
Question 2, Mr. Yates.
To the extent that the city would become involved in utilizing public-private partnerships to increase the development of black businesses, what strategies would you employ to get buy-in from the private sector?
Well, the private sector brings its funds because it expects a fair return, and the role of government generally in your P3 partnerships is to help spread the risk, but let them know that there will be a return. Let me give you an example. When we brought the steamboats back, keep in mind they weren't here. We needed a private partner in there. So actually, I don't want to get into these legal terms, we put them up as in the first position, so they'll get paid back first, and we'll get paid back thoroughly. But that's the advantage that they have. That attracts them into that. For example, the American Queen, everywhere it docks, we pick up $9 here, which comes right back. So show them that they are going to get a fair return. They won't get rich, shouldn't come in onto a partnership with us and expect that they will make their entire year's expectations on it. But just to ensure that they're going to get a fair return. That's all that can be asked. They shouldn't want to get rich off of one contract with the city. They owe something to the city. They've made their money here, they owe something to the city, and they'll get a fair return.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. Quick note, we have moved on to topic 4, utilization of public-private partnerships and other creative efforts to preserve and promote African-American businesses. Mr. Williams.
I hate to do this, but let's talk about the American Queen. Did you know we gave Pitt High $22 million to buy into the American Queen? Did you know that the headquarters is housed in One Commerce Square, which belongs to Pitt High? Do you know we gave Pitt High $10 million to refurbish One Commerce Square? Do you know we gave Pitt High $25 million for AutoZone Park Foundation, that is? I say that to say this. when we talk about private-public partnerships, we got to do them the right way still, people. We still got the same people making money. We got black businesses, African-American businesses, Hispanic businesses, Jewish. I don't care. It's got to be the right deal. But we keep giving it to the same people. But then we stand here and say we got a problem. Everybody in this room who is somebody and has been in business, and I know a lot of you guys are very smart individuals. You got the same people at the table every time. That's what we have to stop. Let's spread it around a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Young people want to eat too.
Thank you, Mr.
I need
Williams.
a brief rebuttal, 30-second rebuttal on that.
30 seconds allowed. Mr. Williams.
Did you know that the stipulation is that it has to buy all of its food here? All of the entertainers are hired out of this city. Everybody who embarks from Memphis has to spend at least one night in our hotels here. So we are getting something out. We're putting chefs to work. We're putting entertainers to work. We're putting folks in the culinary arts to work. The food supply business, it had to headquarter here in Memphis, Tennessee. So there is a return on it. The financing arrangement, Pitt-Hyde was not given $22 million. But Memphis
Thank you,
is
Mr.
coming out
Wharton.
and gaining from that.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. Is Mr. Williams allowed a 30-second rebuttal? Please do, Mr. Williams.
Okay, but I will also say that yes, they may stay in a hotel. Yes, they may eat at a restaurant. But I will tell you that we keep making these TIFs and TDZs. The city doesn't see any return on that money. That money goes up to the state in sales taxes, and guess what? It goes back to pay for the TIFs and the TDZs that we're creating that's going to last for 30 years. We don't see no return on that. Thank you.
I do have to make just one correction.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Mr. Mayor, just hold on one second. Just hold on one second. And let me go ahead and speak to this.
Yes.
A TDZ, the money would go up there, but
Yes.
in a TDZ, it comes back here. Now, if you want to send your money to Knoxville, so be it.
Question 2, Mr. Yates.
Question 2, but before I make that statement, you do recognize that we do have a setup for Funky Politics immediately following here, powered by the Kazuki Network, and we will be doing a lot of fact checking. So just so
Go ahead.
you do have. So in question 2, what we're asking in the previous mayoral forums, there's been a lot of discussion about the administration of the various pilot programs that exist throughout the city. Pilot program standing for payments in lieu of taxes. To the extent that larger corporations often receive pilots based on their ability to create jobs and other economic opportunities, would you, as the mayor, be willing to support a similar tax abatement program that would allow black businesses to receive tax abatement during their startup period in order to increase their odds for success?
The answer is yes. But again, it's going to take much more than that because you've got to get the capital there. If you don't have the capital to even think about starting a business, you don't get to the point of a tax abatement. So the answer is yes.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. Mr. Williams.
I would have to agree with the mayor. The answer is yes. But I would make that for small businesses, period, because we have a lot of, just because you're a black business or a white business, if you are a small business and you're trying to make it, I can remember when I started my business, property taxes, sales taxes, they were killing me and the money that I made. So if in fact I could get some tax abatements, then it would help me to sustain my business a little bit longer. So I think that it should be for small businesses, period. I think that if we help, and I've already talked about it, grow and develop, sustain small businesses that employ people within the communities, recycles money in the communities, the money stays here, I think that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Question 3, posed by Mr. Bernard.
Over the past few months, the Memphis Chamber had taken specific interest in marketing our city, its business, its resources, and attraction. How would you, as mayor, engage the chamber and other business groups to develop similar program to promote black business?
That's precisely what we're doing now with the current discussions that are underway. I referred to that earlier. The chamber obviously does not have any legal authority, but it does have the power to persuade its members to say, look at what you're doing when you sign a contract with the city. Why don't you do the same thing when you sign a contract with the private sector? So that's precisely what we're engaged in with the chamber. In other words, if you're going to do the right thing when you're on a contract with the city, do the right thing when you're doing your private dealings. Some of these businesses may only get one contract a year with the city, and they'll do precisely what we ask them to do, but they get 99 private contracts and they say to heck with it. And that's where the change is going to be made. If we put all of the contracts that the city enters into in a given year, if we took all of them and gave them to small businesses, it would not move the needle. To move the needle, we've got to put pressure, moral persuasion.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton.
On the private sector.
Mr. Williams.
I agree. We do have to put more pressure on the private sector. But once again, that goes back to holding them to the letter of the law. Okay? That's something that we have not done. And the other thing is the chamber. Oh my God. That's a whole nother animal. That's a whole nother animal. And anybody in here, you know what I'm talking about. You can act like you don't if you want to. But they have specific interests right now. And they're catering to their interests. Period. Their circle of 100. Hello, somebody. As a small businessman, I don't even know if I could be in that circle. So I'm not their interest right now. That's why they stopped taking the $6 million from the city that they were getting, so that they could become more of a political force. And guess what? They had people on the council that they just wiggling during their bidding. You think it's funny, but I'm being affected by this. My family's being affected by this. So yes, we need to put pressure on them. We need to stop letting them run this city. And we need to give it back to the people.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
Question 4. What are some examples of any other initiatives that you would develop to produce activation in the private sector to ensure growth and development of black businesses? Mayor Wharton.
Did you say activation?
Activation.
Well, again, make it just as attractive to develop in the core city as it is in the outlying areas. We have to come up with tools such as how do we redevelop the Mall of Memphis site. And that's when I referred to what we call the community builder project. Sometimes you shouldn't focus solely on how many jobs is a given enterprise going to bring. You bring jobs, maybe they got 100 jobs, and you put a few million in. That's good. You don't laugh at that. But if you say by locating this factory here, it's going to improve the property values in this entire community. And that's, if we ever get the Mall of Memphis site back, all of those strip malls across the street that are now boarded up, if you put 300 or 400 employees on that site, it's going to serve as a catalyst to bring that entire community back. So those are the kinds of projects I'm supporting. We could do the same thing, take the Chelsea and Thomas strip through there where the junkyards and all. If we go in there and give the right kind of incentives where folks go in and say, I will build up this community, the whole neighborhood is lifted up. And we're doing concrete things on it. We're going to do fact checking. It's called the Community Builder Project. Check it out.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. Mr. Williams.
Could you repeat that question, please?
What are some examples of any other initiatives that you would develop and produce for activation in the private sector to ensure the growth and development of black businesses?
That was good. I definitely like that when you talk about Danny Thomas and going back in, redeveloping those areas. We used to have Hourglass over there, Jackson Cookie Company. We had Firestone, International Harvester. We had so many businesses over in that area that provided jobs to local people. And I'm a firm believer that if we work on the basics of the city, if we get the crime down, when I moved around the world, it was two things I looked for my family: a safe place to live and good educational opportunities for my children. So I'm a firm believer that we have a lot of amenities that they already want. We own our own utilities. We provide low sewage. We provide low utilities, low cost of living. We just got to get this city back on sound footing to whereas companies will want to come here, as opposed to, yeah, they come here, but then they don't want to live here because they don't feel that they're safe. They don't feel that the educational opportunities for the children are adequate unless they go to Lausanne or Harding Academy. My public school system should be just as great for my children out there in the communities. Gets back to investing. Bottom line, we got to retool, we got to refit, we got to push pause, and then we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank our candidates for the evening. We have reached the end of our program.
Thank you, Jesus. They gave us all 16 questions.
And that's one time
That's tough for two candidates.
Mike Williams and A.C. Wharton agree.
Jesus. They gave us all 16 questions for all candidates.
So we have reached
You
the
did.
closing statement. Each of you will be given 2 minutes to respond. I'll ask you to briefly summarize your mayoral platform as it relates to the development, promotion, and sustaining of black businesses in Memphis. Mayor Wharton.
Thank you. First of all, again, and I'm not given to just celebrating and getting folks all revved up, knowing that what I promise cannot be done. So I always have to say, keep in mind, you got the U.S. Supreme Court that sets parameters, and you have a state legislature that controls a lot of the things that we wish to do in terms of minority participation. So let's be real, not get into fantasy land here, but within that, there are many things we can do. First, of course, is access to capital. We can dance around this all we want. I can open the door wide open, but if you can't walk, you can't walk in. And it's called capital, access to capital. So that is going to be critical. And then once you get access to capital, make sure that the business processes facilitate the entrance of small businesses. I've said very specifically, pay on time, get rid of the crazy insurance requirements, get rid of the crazy bonding requirements, don't over-regulate, make it easy, put all of the services under one roof, have one person to enforce it, the chief diversity officer who will report directly to the mayor, have it in one building, which we're going to do. But one thing we've missed here this evening, we've talked a lot about jobs and things like that, which is important. But one of the things, and there's someone in this room tonight, I will have, and I'd engage someone to work on my staff so that when these projects come in, where they're looking for investors, it's not enough to say, how many people will you hire? Ask them, how many equity partners will you take in when you're going to build that hotel? Are you willing to take in someone who can own part of it? Jobs are nice, but you can't put a job in your will. You ever seen anybody pass their job down? There's a difference between income and wealth. We can come up with income. So my focus will be not only in increasing the number of jobs, but increasing wealth. That's where we're left out. You've never been able to write your job into your will, but you can pass, as my dad and mama did, my little one-room grocery store, and it's still up there. That's how you create it. That's what we need to focus on.
Thank you,
and I
Mr.
do have
Wharton.
a platform for that. Thank you all so much.
I also want to say thank you for this evening, for allowing me the opportunity. I want to tell you that I love my city. I think Memphis is a beautiful city, but I do think we have some issues. We didn't get in this situation overnight, and some people are going to say, what situation? 0.1% is what I'm talking about. So we're not going to get out of it overnight. We're going to have to start grooming our young people to become entrepreneurs. We're going to have to start we're going to have to teach them. But then, in the olden days, guess what? They reached back. Since I got back to Memphis, I find that there's a crab mentality here. Hello. We got to get away from that, because when I can go to other cities and invest in projects, and guess what? They welcome me with open arms. But I can't even do it here in my own city. That is crazy. Don't you know that it's power in numbers when I talked about building consortiums so that you can handle those big jobs? We got to be able to do that. The Hispanics come here, they live 25 in an apartment. The next thing you know, they have an employment firm. The next thing you know, they got a restaurant, they got a hotel, they got it. But we talk about building wealth in the black community. We have failed the generation that we have left behind. And it's time for us to take responsibility right here, right now, this time, this appointed place, this election, and to right this ship. I would say the mayor was right. We need to build black wealth. Hey, I don't have a problem saying you're right. I already said we need to create black millionaires in this city. I think we have the ability to do it. But we have to do it. Not just talk about it. I mean, really sit down with the power, the movers and the shakers. I see a lot of smart people in this room. I've seen you all over the city. I've seen you doing and investing in all kinds of things, Mr. Gibson. So I know we have the ability, Councilman Board. We just got to come together collectively, for real, on honest footing, because guess what? The citizens of Memphis deserve it. Thank you so much.
I want to thank both of our candidates for being here tonight. They've shown that the issues that are important to us are the issues that are important to them. Thank you for being here. Let's give them another round of applause.
Thank you.